My drugs never came with like nutritional info. You don't know what you're consuming. I just know that whatever they give me is going to make me feel better. At 32 years old, I've buried more friends than my 78-year-old grandmother has.
Harm reduction does enable people to stay alive so they can go into recovery.
When you're dope sick and your body's just in excruciating pain and you just know one thing and one thing only is going to take this away, on top of being in the most excruciating physical pain that you could ever experience, it's the mental torture that goes along with it.
You were in rehab, 17 rehabs.
Yes. I have hit so many rock bottoms and not a single one scared me from using.
I needed drugs more than I needed air.
Love people until they want to give themselves a chance.
Melanie's story is a story of addiction, of homelessness, and a story of hope, as she shares not only about how Savage Sisters Recovery is working to help people in Philadelphia, but how she got out of addiction herself and is now working to help others. She was a xylazine addict, homeless, on Kensington Boulevard in Philadelphia. Xylazine, otherwise known as tranq, rotted her flesh right down to the bone. You would think a normal person would just stop using drugs, but that's the thing. Drugs take over people's lives. We need more harm reduction services, not less. There is a crisis on America's streets with addiction. Our work has never been more important than it is today. We need you. Please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. If you have some ideas on topics we should cover or guests we should interview, please email us at podcast@invisiblepeople.tv. I was just noticing your shark tattoo.
Yeah, so due to my, dependence upon xylazine, I was lucky enough that when I got sober, everything healed up and I was able to get tattoos on both of my arms and kind of cover that up.
I wouldn't have even noticed if you didn't point it out. You had asked me if I had ever done Quaaludes. I was an addict many years ago, before there was things like tranq. And for people that don't know, can you explain?
What tranq is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so tranq or xylazine has been dominating the drug supply, specifically in Philadelphia, and now it's spread throughout the country. It's been found in every state, and it's an animal-grade tranquilizer, and it's toxic, and it's been detrimental to people who use substances, and it's one of the reasons that we advocate so heavily for safe supply.
Obviously, well, I'm speculating here, you've done heroin and fentanyl.
Yes.
How does tranq compare?
It's not a good time, I'll tell you that. I don't know anybody that prefers it, right? And a question I get a lot is, well, who would choose to do that? And the truth is I never had a choice, right? Once I became a customer, right, to the drug market in Kensington, my drugs never came with like nutritional info, right? You don't know what you're consuming when you do it.
Right.
I just know that whatever they give me is going to make me feel better. So it started with heroin, right? And then the fentanyl started to trickle in. And before you know it, you're dependent on fentanyl. Fentanyl was a little similar to heroin, though. It was the same euphoria. It was a little more intense. And then they started to add the xylazine and same thing, right? Before I know it, my body is dependent on it. It's not the same feeling, right? It turns into a balancing act of, okay, I have to do the tranq to stay well, to keep myself from getting dope sick, but then I'm heavily sedated. So now I have to increase my meth use or my crack use. All day long, you're just playing this game of like trying to keep yourself just awake enough to be safe, but, still sedated enough to feel better.
Right. That's why you see so many people nodding.
Yes.
One of the things that I wish is an experience I could give to everybody that doesn't understand addiction is dope sick.
Ugh.
Because they don't understand, they think people can just flip a switch and quit doing drugs. Yet, dope sick is so bad, you're maintaining. The reason that you're doing tranq or fentanyl or heroin or whatever is so you don't get sick.
Exactly.
You're maintaining. For me, when I was using, I needed drugs more than I needed air.
Yes.
It took over everything. There was no choice that I made, right? It wasn't a conscious choice. It changed everything. That's why they call it addiction,
Yeah.
right? Can you explain that? Can you explain dope sick?
I hate when you hear like medical professionals say, oh, it's like the worst flu you've ever had, because the flu has never made me want to take my own life, right? Because on top of being in the most excruciating physical pain that you could ever experience, it's the mental torture that goes along with it. You know, when you have the flu, it's like, okay, I'm sick. I know I'm going to feel better. But when you're dope sick and your body's just in excruciating pain and you just know one thing and one thing only is going to take this away. And what can I do to make that happen and to achieve that?
Right. When I was drinking and using, I didn't like downers of any kind. I did heroin to sleep. I was doing speed, meth, or cocaine if I couldn't get any speed. I didn't like cocaine much. Cocaine was like, just take my money because I just wanted more all the time, right?
Yeah.
So all this fentanyl or tranq, I never experienced, but it's what we're seeing destroying lives.
Yes.
But you're an example. There's hope.
There is. I definitely made it out. I don't know how, and I don't know what it finally took for me. I know things that like helped, and I'm so grateful that I did. But I'm also not naive to the fact that I'm not out of it forever. Like I could easily be back there any second, and I don't take that for granted.
Similar, I often question, how did I get it when I see so many people still suffering, right? Or still in active drug use. Somebody was there to love me until I could love myself.
Definitely.
Which brings us to Savage Sisters.
Yes.
And they helped you get off the streets of Kensington. I mean, Kensington, let's paint the picture here, right? There's Skid Row in Los Angeles. There's a zone in Phoenix, the Tenderloin in San Francisco. But Kensington is probably the most infamous, notorious drug zone in the United States.
It's just so convenient. And that was a barrier for me for so long, because in the beginning, when I would just have a drug dealer or something like that, I might consider relapsing. And if they didn't answer, I took that as my sign of like, okay, not now. But to know there's somewhere you can go 24 hours a day to get anything that you want makes it really, really hard.
And as we're talking about, people are maintaining, meaning they have to use drugs or they get dope sick.
Yes.
So you're going to stay in Kensington.
Right.
Because it's
why
easier.
Go anywhere else? I might leave for a little bit, it's go make money somewhere, go do what I have to do. But you always come back. Even when I had somewhere to stay, even if I wasn't necessarily like living on the street, there was very short windows of time that I wasn't in Kensington.
And you were in rehab.
Yes. I got sent to jail. I was in jail for about 3.5 months, and they sent me to rehab. And I was very upset about the fact that they were sending me to rehab, right? Because I know everything. Right. And I had been to rehab 16 times prior. And what's one more going to do?
That's what you were in rehab. 17 rehabs.
Yes.
Before you got it.
Yes.
17.
Yes. And the jail sent me to this rehab, and it was a DOC rehab. So all of the girls that were in there with me were from state prison. I was just in the county jail for a little possession charge. And I remember like taking a look at them and thinking, shit, like, is this what the rest of my life is going to be like? If I go back, am I going to just end up, in that cycle? Even in jail, I would see girls, they would get released 2 weeks later, come back in, and it would make me sick to my stomach, right? But I know what it's like to be caught up in that cycle. And the time came for me to figure out what my next step was going to be. And I made a decision that I should probably go to like a recovery house and give myself a little bit of a chance, because Kensington's always going to be there, right? This chance might not be. So I said, look, give myself 90 days, see if my life gets better. And if not, I can go back to what I know. And I found Savage Sisters. I just Googled, recovery houses in South Philadelphia. And Savage Sisters was the first one that came up. And I'm reading all the rules with my counselor, and I'm like, this is too much. I don't know if I can do that. She's like, you don't really have anything else going on right now. I think you can handle that. And it ended up being the best decision I ever made.
Back when I worked in the television industry, I was severely addicted, and I went to a doctor, and I literally asked, I'm worried about becoming Jeffrey Dahmer. And the doctor responded, he said, if you're worried about becoming Jeffrey Dahmer, you're not going to be Jeffrey Dahmer.
And then he said, you need to go into a treatment, and treatment is usually 28 days to 90 days. That's all insurance will pay for. People don't understand that, and it's nearly impossible to get sober in that amount of time. But for me, I was like, oh gosh, I got too much going on in my own head, and I ended up homeless. And I lived in a homeless shelter for 7 fucking years. And nobody should live in a homeless shelter longer than a few months and then be placed into housing.
No, it's crazy the stuff we tell ourselves too, because I remember going to treatment for like the first time and the second time, and people would share their stories about like how their childhood was awful or something happened to them. And I would rack my brain and be like, am I blocking out like a huge piece of trauma? Like I needed validation of like why I was the way I was. And now I can just accept like, that's just how I was born. And, you know, I can't safely consume drugs or alcohol.
I want to talk about Savage Sisters because you guys are amazing, right? You're helping people on the streets of Kensington get off the streets of Kensington. And you're saving lives. And there's all kinds of challenges. Like today is the last day of your drop-in center. So we'll cover all that. But before we go away from the 17 rehabs, I think it's important because the public believes, many people do, we're just going to force people into treatment. I think they just want people gone out of sight. They just think treatment is the solution, but you're proof 17 times, your value why we need harm reduction. There's not enough treatment for people that want to go into treatment.
Exactly. There's so many barriers across the board. And like you said, people just want it out of their face, right? Well, what about the people that aren't in their face? There was years before I was ever homeless where I made it my mission every single day to go to Kensington to buy my drugs and to go home. And now I'm just a kid in the suburbs of Philadelphia that, so what? Because I'm not unhoused on the street, I'm not a problem to you, I'm not an eyesore. You know, I was a good kid growing up and in high school, and I drank because that's what kids in high school do. And I remember like really getting drunk for the first time, and like something clicked, right? Where I was like, oh, I can breathe, right? To where now I'm a little daring to try other things. And it's just, you know, it's the weed, it's the Xanax, it's the perk. I fell in love with opiates. It was the one thing that fully shut my brain off. But again, it's stigma. I wasn't telling anybody I was doing opiates. When it progressed to heroin, I definitely wasn't telling anybody that. And, you know, I could only keep it together for so long until, you know, it's now I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the one with this drug addiction, and nobody had any idea how to help. It wasn't talked about in my high school, in my grade school, like, hey, what to do if. I didn't know you could become physically dependent on something. I'm so ever grateful for my mom because she spent days, weeks, she would, you know, trying to get me into a treatment center, sleeping outside my bedroom door so, you know, I couldn't like escape, and just like beating down walls, begging somebody to listen. And fortunately, as time goes on, you learn how to play the game better and navigate how to get into treatment facilities. But she was always by my side. And I look at some of the people in Kensington who don't have that relationship, or maybe don't have that parent or that family member. And I want to be that for somebody, because I know that that woman has saved me so many times. My mom just taking me to hospital, just like begging anybody to help me. She had no idea what to do, and the insurance and figuring everything out. And it was just such a nightmare. And those things have gotten better over time. But now where's the bed availability? Where's the updated withdrawal protocols? Where is the aftercare? So many times just from doing intakes for the recovery houses, we get calls with people saying, oh, well, they're getting discharged tomorrow. And if we don't have a bed, they're okay with just, oh, we'll send them to a shelter, or oh, they'll figure it out. That shouldn't even be an option, because that's such a crucial stage in the recovery journey.
Because then they're back outside where they're going to drink and use again.
Yes.
Because people use drugs to escape pain. It's also interesting that there's so much opposition to harm reduction, yet harm reduction does enable people to stay alive so they can go into recovery.
Exactly.
I don't know anybody that supports harm reduction that doesn't also support recovery.
Right.
But the recovery people are against harm reduction. It makes no sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either. And I tried to stop trying to figure it out. right? It doesn't have to make sense to you. It's evidence-based. I know it works. People know it works. And it's just necessary.
Yeah.
The amount of overdoses that Savage has reversed on the streets, right? And we just do it as part of our day, right? We see somebody, we reverse their overdose, we keep along with our day. If we weren't there, what would have happened? And then maybe that person doesn't have a chance to make it into recovery. People say, oh, you have to let people hit their rock bottom. And for me, I have hit so many rock bottoms, I couldn't even tell you. And they got worse and they got worse and they got worse. And not a single one scared me from using. Yeah. I was always ready to go back for more. So I don't believe in that. And I don't think people need that. And I don't know why it's so frowned upon to just love people until they want to give themselves a chance.
I know for me, looking at how I got 29 years sober, being one of the worst of the worst. If you saw me on Hollywood Boulevard, you would have crossed to the other side of the street, is that people loved on me. And it took years.
Yeah.
It's still a work in progress,
yes.
Right? And that's the thing, is that we have to be there to love on people unconditionally. Dead addicts don't recover. And Savage Sisters, you do recovery houses. You do harm reduction, you do outreach, you're losing your drop-in center today. Tell us about Savage Sisters. You're definitely my kind of people.
Yeah, so we do harm reduction, housing, and education. Sarah, our executive director, has been passionate about it, has been doing this for a very long time, right? And she's had a very loud voice. And I learned a lot from her. When I got here, we only had about 3 recovery houses. We had 5 outreaches a month. And it opened my mind because I came from such a structured 12-step background, but I felt a lot of judgment. And when I got to Savage Sisters, it was the first time where I felt like I was able to make mistakes and I didn't feel judged for it. I felt like, yeah, of course you did that. You're in early recovery. We don't expect anything less of you. And that's been the biggest thing I've learned. I love when I'm talking to another girl in recovery and she's upset about a stupid decision she made. And I'm like, oh, I did that 5 times. Like, you're supposed to, you know what I mean? It's what you do after and you're going to learn from it. And then to do the outreach. For me, it was something to do. I had about 6 months clean when I started volunteering to do the outreach and to see people I was out there with. And they would say, oh my God, I can't believe you're sober. And I'd be like, I can't believe it either. And then having that thing to look forward to. And just to feel
that must have felt good.
Yeah, and to feel like I'm making a difference.
Yeah.
Any other time I tried to get sober, it was for selfish reasons. Okay, I want to get a job and a house and a car and look good and get new sneakers. It was always about me. It was never about okay, what is my plan? Why am I still here? And Savage Sisters really showed me what my purpose was. And everything has been a learning experience. I went to countless trainings with Sarah and watched her explain what harm reduction is to people, what xylazine is, and just be so passionate about it to where, I went from being terrified to do a training to now I do them all the time. And it's one of my favorite parts of this. And just be okay with not being liked. Yeah. People don't have to like what I'm doing, but I'm still going to do it. We're still going to do it.
How many recovery homes do you have now?
Right now we have 10.
10?
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yes.
That's a lot.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Your drop-in center is closing today.
Yes.
So there's a lot of, I'm going to be nice and just call it drama here in Philadelphia surrounding harm reduction in Kensington. I'm sure the politicians don't like the spotlight. Right. I mean, Kensington is now a genre on YouTube. Horrible. Guys, live streams, and it's just horrible. People are using video and photos of people in their worst human condition to make money.
Yes.
And it's just horrible. There's a lot of police activity. Your day center's being shut down. What's going on?
So everybody wants to be the person that cleaned up Kensington, right? Our current mayor is not the first one to try, and she's probably not going to be the last one to try. Same approaches. It's always police enforcement, right? Let's lock everybody up. We're going to clean up the streets. And this time they're taking an attack on harm reduction. They're trying to paint the picture as people who use drugs are in Kensington because of people doing harm reduction. And that's not the case. It's never been the case. We didn't just go set up in a residential neighborhood and say, hey, we're going to give out clean syringes and hope that people come here to use drugs because we're giving them out, right? It was the other way around. And it's evidence based practice, and it sucks that we have to be the scapegoat for a policy failure, right? Kensington was a containment strategy. It worked exactly how everybody wanted it to work. And now, the mayor's getting a little bit of attention for cleaning it up, and it starts with pushing organizations like us out. And, it doesn't help that we're not the people that are going to play nice. We're not going to go down quietly. We're going to tell you what we think and why this is wrong and what actually needs to happen. And people don't like that. That took a long time for me to be on board with too. I'm a people pleaser. I don't like confrontation. But when I'm in the drop-in center and there's 40 people that come in every single day that I know on a first name basis and look forward to us being open, look forward to taking a shower, look forward to a Rice Krispie treat, it's really hard for me to just keep my mouth shut and bow out quietly.
Yeah. And what this mayor is doing, you guys lost your lease.
Yes.
Which came from political pressure.
Yes.
So now there's homeless people and people suffering from substance use that don't have a safe place to nod out, to take a shower, to grab a snack, to get a hug, right?
Yeah, just hang out.
And with you guys gone, it puts people at risk of more overdoses. I mean, you guys already said how many overdoses you've reversed. It's just, I'm trying to find words here because I saw you getting emotional. We were walking on the streets together and I saw you go up to somebody and you first checked their pulse. So you knew they were alive, but you couldn't get them to respond. You're shaking them. And I was preparing myself for the worst, that this person had died. And I immediately thought of the person, but also you, like you do this all the time. And if there was a overdose prevention center, which we've highlighted, that person would be inside in a safe place, that there wouldn't be this risk of dying, and there'd be a path to detox and recovery if the person wanted. Instead, they're just out on the sidewalk, and I went from emotional to mad, and then the mayor's like pushing people and police.
So the part that hits home the most for me when I get emotional about the drop-in center closing, for the last 2 winters, the city of Philadelphia has done the absolute, I don't even want to call it the bare minimum because it's less than that when it comes to code blues, anytime the temperature drops below freezing. And you were in our office. It's not big, right? We have 16 Adirondack chairs, maybe like 3 foldable chairs, and we would stay open 24 hours just as a warming center, right? No showers. We'll make you hot chocolate, but just come in, we'll lock the gate, and you have somewhere to be warm throughout the night. And that was all we could do. And, of course, we were loud about it. Please, somebody help, somebody do something. And to know that just those 16 people won't have anywhere to go this winter, like that sucks, What are we going to do then when it's a code blue and, there's nowhere for these people to go?
And the police action, pushing people to another part of Kensington or another part of the city, is not going to solve anything.
No, absolutely not.
Nothing at all.
Okay, you come out, you tell somebody they can't stand somewhere. You find out they have a warrant, you arrest them. What about after that? Okay, if somebody wants to use drugs, they're going to use drugs. And when they get back out and do it again, are we just going to keep repeating that over and over again? And we're the ones paying for it, right? This is all our tax dollars. So yeah, I'm all for a plan that might be effective, but this isn't effective. And there's so many arguments over the overdose prevention site. Everybody wants to say safe injection site and, who's realistically going to use that? And, well, we don't know unless we try. Right. And the only reason I don't think somebody would now is because Kensington has been basically an overdose prevention site for so long because of harm reduction organizations that are down there all the time. But with the current climate, I would go in somewhere where I knew I could use safely and make it through it.
Yeah. My friend Jen, who works for the Sidewalk Project, says, we have bars that are supervised consumption sites.
Yep.
And, the same thing. My favorite place is Insight in Vancouver, downtown Lower East Side. Also very notorious like Kensington and Skid Row and the Zone and the Tenderloin. It was the first supervised injection site in North America. I visited twice. I'm trying to get back there. And why I loved it was unconditional love. It's manned by peers, people using drugs, and then staff and clinicians, doctors and nurses. You don't know who is who unless somebody overdoses or somebody's having a heart attack, and then the clinicians, kick into high gear. And I've been in hundreds, if not thousands of churches, AA meetings, NA meetings, all kinds of different communal gatherings. And it was a harm reduction site where I felt the most unconditional love because, there was people in wheelchairs, there was people in suits and ties, there was, every kind of person imaginable, and they're all hurting in some way. And nobody was judged because they were using drugs or they were in a wheelchair or they had suit and tie. They were all respected as people. It's frustrating there's so much opposition to harm reduction when it saves lives and saves taxpayer money.
I mean, especially at the rates that we're losing people, right? I just had to make a speech in Harrisburg for Overdose Awareness Day. And it's like, at 32 years old, I've buried more friends than my 78-year-old grandmother has. Like, why aren't we looking at that? What is going on isn't working, right? We know people are always going to use drugs. People have always used drugs. And think about all of the people, and myself included, who wouldn't tell anybody what I was doing because to admit that I was a heroin addict at the time, that was crazy. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. That wasn't talked about. We had the DARE program come in and just say no, and that was it. And everything. Stigma just kept so many secrets for everybody, for all of my friends. And it's like, if this could just be like an open conversation and be like, I get it. I get why you want to use drugs. You're in pain. Or how you said you use downers to go to sleep. That's why I started. It was my own head that kept me up. The first time I did something and I slept like a baby that night, that's all I was chasing, was that peace of mind for my head to just shut off. And it's not like that for everybody. Some people just use drugs because they can be fun and it's a good time and, find themselves in situations. It's not a black and white issue. How you said about bars being safe consumption sites, like that's how I break it down to people. Because as somebody in recovery, I thought it was a crazy idea the first time I heard it too. And then I went and toured one. And like you said, I couldn't tell the difference between somebody who worked there and somebody who used drugs. And it blew my mind, all the other services that were offered. And that connection is like just such a big piece that people do not take into consideration.
Brushing your teeth is harm reduction. Fastening your seatbelt is harm reduction.
Yep.
You can go on and on and on, but there's something about addiction and drug use that people just find something so common sense, like a needle exchange, which literally is a public safety issue.
Right.
It's not just helping people using drugs, intravenous drugs, it's helping the public because it's preventing diseases from being spread.
Right.
But they're against that. That's what I hear is one of the biggest issues here in Philadelphia. The politicians are against the needle exchange.
Yeah. And I think it's just because the word needle, again, is like taboo, right? And, it's a lot of like pinning harm reduction organizations against like the residential community. And it's like, we are here for the residential community also. People say like, oh, well, you wouldn't want to live there. And you're absolutely right. I want it and it's unacceptable. But your answer to the problem is not the correct answer. That's why we emphasize so heavily when we do outreaches, we bring needle disposal bins and trash bags and grabbers, and we make sure that we're picking up more than we're distributing. That's why it's so important to just have one porta potty somewhere, one public restroom. Like, kids absolutely shouldn't have to step over human feces, but take a look at why they do, right? And it all comes back to stigma too, because if anybody unhoused on substances walks into a store and says, "Can I use your bathroom?" Absolutely not.
There's no public bathrooms for anybody anymore.
Anybody.
That's a definite serious crisis. Savage Sisters has been around for how long?
I want to say since 2017.
It's a long time.
Yes.
And you're not giving up.
No.
Hopefully you will get another day center or more. One of the things that I've also found interesting is people complain about visible drug use, but most addicts are in housing, so you don't see them use because there's walls. But you're complaining about people using outside, and then you're complaining about a supervised injection facility
Exactly.
or where they're inside and you wouldn't see it.
Exactly.
It's like you're just bitching for the sake of bitching. We need to solve these issues. We need to help people. We need to love on people until they can love on themselves.
Exactly. There's methadone clinics all over in residential neighborhoods, and nobody bats an eye or says a word. They might, complain in their neighborhood Facebook group if there's too many people hanging out at a Dunkin' Donuts after. But how is that any different? Yeah. It's people getting life-sustaining services in a building and keeping them off the street.
How do we fix it? How do we fix Kensington? I mean, we know criminalization just make it worse.
It does just make it worse. And the way it needs to be fixed is everybody needs to be a part of the conversation. I'm so tired of people who do not have lived experience making decisions surrounding people who use drugs. It doesn't make any sense. I'm so tired of a senator that maybe had a drinking problem in the 60s trying to relate to people on my level. And it's not the same. It's just not the same thing. Even, people in the recovery community who talk about it, about people who use drugs, like everything has changed so drastically and it has only gotten so much worse and it's only going to continue to get worse. Again, okay, you want to arrest everybody and sure, it sounds great to give them the option of treatment or jail, but what happens when there is no treatment beds available? We need to start there. We need low barrier housing. We need more shelters. There's just so many things that could be looked at as a public health approach because the issues around homelessness and substance use, it's not looked at.
And to your point, I have lived experience of mental illness, drug use, and homelessness, but I've never used fentanyl. I've never used tranq. So I can't advise. You do need people that have that experience. I have some idea because I've been dope sick and I kicked major drugs, but just thinking about tranq and how addictive it is and takes over somebody's life.
Well, so that's like, people who may have gotten sober a little while ago and they remember the heroin detox yet. It's like, oh, you just muscle through it. And I've muscled through it and it sucks, right? But it's doable. You haven't detoxed off tranq. You have no idea what it feels like. Right. And I did it on a jail cell floor with zero medication. And it was the closest I ever felt to death in my entire life.
Oh my gosh.
And so when people are like leaving treatment facilities because their withdrawal's not being taken care of, like I understand it. If I was able to walk out of that jail cell, I would have. Yeah. And, fortunately I couldn't. And I did get through it, but it makes sense. That's why I don't doubt any, but like, of course you walked out of a treatment center. You're in that much excruciating pain.
You're lucky. Some people get lucky. Most people that go into jail or prison don't come out better.
No.
And it creates more pain for them and for their family who they're connected to. And that just increases the reason that you're going to want to escape the pain and use drugs. There's drug use inside jail and prisons. It's expensive to taxpayers to incarcerate people. Jails are already overcrowded. And then you come out and you have a criminal record. I've been in jail 4 times, just overnighters, right? I want to clarify.
Yeah.
Back years ago, you used to get a bus ticket and $200. You don't even get that anymore.
I wish.
Right? So now the person is outside, homeless. They now have a criminal record that's going to prevent them from getting a job, even if they could get a job, right? It just makes everything worse. So this push for criminalization is just, it's very scary where everything's headed.
No, I definitely got lucky. And the only way I can look at it right is like divine intervention. The way everything had panned out for me. I'm able to have a career now with criminal charges because my boss has criminal charges. You know what I mean? Like I found my people. I also, had the support of Savage behind me. When I got to the house, I got hit with more charges I had to deal with. And I had the support behind me to help me get a lawyer and help me go face these charges and turn myself in and be accountable and show up to probation.
Wow, good for you.
I I cannot imagine doing that by myself.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have. I would have been like, you know what? I'll deal with this later. And that's how everything is. It snowballs. Like, I was so fortunate to have the people around me that I did.
Is there anything that you'd like to add? I mean, we've pretty much made the case that Savage Sisters loves on people until they can love themselves. You're proof of that?
I would just like to add that we're not going anywhere. Okay. And whether, I was joking earlier, but if that means me in a camouflage suit hiding in a bush so I can give somebody a water bottle when it's 99 degrees out, like, I'll do that. We'll do that. There's always going to be a need. I would love for there to not be a need.
We have to clarify that, because didn't you just have to get a permit, or were you ticketed for?
So there was rumors going around that a police officer said something to one of our staff members at an outreach that, like, oh, you need a permit to hand out water. And we looked into it and it was true. And they have a loophole where, somebody could have an allergy. And if you're giving them that, you could be liable. So I applied for the permit. I'll jump through whatever hoops we have to jump through. Sarah is huge on that. Savage is huge on that. Like, we will do whatever we have to do because somebody has to do it.
And water, people need water.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. When you say wear camouflage, it goes back to how they're criminalizing not just homelessness, but people that are working to help homeless people.
Yeah. So many barriers of, oh, we used to serve in McPherson Park, and then it was you needed a special park permit. So we moved, and then it's, oh, you can't set up a table at all. So we got wagons, and it's one thing after another. But like at the end of the day, like, we're people with lived experience, and like, we'll play the game and we'll do what needs to be done. And, hopefully one day that there will be an answer and there won't be a need for us. Right. And I can go be a waitress somewhere. But until that day comes, like, we're still going to be out there.
Yeah. How do people support you? How do they find you?
So you can go to our website, which is savagesisters.org. We are actually having a fundraiser because, we have no funding for anything we do in the city of Philadelphia. So it's really to just kind of keep us around Kensington.
And that is extremely important. We need more of you.
Yes.
Very much so. Thank you for having the courage to share your story.
Of course.